Hey, this is Rob Anspach, and welcome back to another edition of E-Heroes for those keeping count. This is episode 326. And my next guest will help you overcome fear and failure. Now you're probably going, what? What? I don't I don't have fear. I don't have failure. You know what? I've been doing this for a long time. Everybody has fear. Everybody has failure. And so I brought on the win anyway guy, Rich Hopkins, and thanks for being here. This is going to be interesting.
Well, I certainly hope so, Rob.
I got to
But
see
if
one of your,
not, we'll win anyway.
I got to watch one of your TED Talks on, I guess your website, and I was just thinking, wow, it's very similar story. Our dads tried to teach us, valuable lessons early on in age, and my dad was always beating me at checkers and chess, and I was like, you know what? No, I'm not doing this anymore. Now, unlike me, you went and you found a book to help you elevate, your skills to be able to beat your dad. I just kept losing against him.
Well, I don't know. Is there a book on checkers? You can still check it out.
Yeah, now, I mean, my dad's almost 70 years, oh, he's 80, almost 80 years old, and I think he'll just let me win. Yeah, it was, I think I took a lot of those lessons though, being an entrepreneur. And, I do things now on a whole different level. And you always hear the expression, oh, well, he's playing checkers and you're playing chess. That's just totally different. But you know what? We take that same philosophy against our competitors. And it got to the point where I got tired of saying I have competitors because no one does what I do in the manner I do it. And so it helps me elevate my own game.
Right. It was interesting. My wife was wanting to do a TikTok based on something she's been doing with her preschool. And she's like, yeah, but there are a million preschool TikToks. I'm like, well, that just means proof of concept.
Mhm.
Do it. Just do it too, but do it you.
Right.
Make it hers.
Mhm. So, I'm looking at all your stuff, and you have win anyway everywhere. How'd that come about?
From losing a lot. Well, I mean that's kind of where it did come from because when you lose a lot, the world likes to focus on the fact that you lost.
Hmm.
In particular, the World Championship of Public Speaking through Toastmasters, which you're aware of, a nonprofit
Hmm.
organization around the world, helps people overcome the fear of public speaking. And they have a contest every year that crowns a world champion. And I've been to the World Championship final stage twice. Took third in 2006, did not place in 2008, and luckily for me in 2008, they were making a documentary about it. So my losing is well chronicled on film for all time. But the world wanted to tell me that I was a loser and that maybe I wasn't even a good loser. But the point is, hey, I got there.
Hmm.
What did I learn along the way? What have I accomplished? And I had to celebrate what I actually did do
Hmm.
and then keep going. I'm still competing for that. I'm still trying to make millions of dollars in my life. I'm still trying to make my family happy. I'm still trying to have a great life. And even if you don't always meet your goal, like not being allergic to your cats, you will have the opportunity to define for yourself how you look at it
Hmm.
if you stop letting the world tell you that you're a loser.
Right. Yeah, there's so many examples. I know being an entrepreneur early on, my first entrepreneurial venture crashed and burned, and I owed people money, my relatives. I owed them money, and it took me 6 years to pay them back, and then finally have the courage to start another business. And everybody thought, Rob, you failed in the first one. You're going to fail this one. And I just, and it was within the first 3 years, I was like, oh my God, I'm like close to bankruptcy. Is what they're saying true? I'm going to fail this one. And I took matters into my own hands. I stopped letting other people run my marketing and flew to Arizona. And Joe Polish was doing a conference. So I learned from Joe. I learned from Dan Kennedy. I learned from all these brilliant people how to do effective marketing. And that was 1998. Now, 25, 26 years later, I'm teaching all this to other people. I'm writing books and doing all these things, but it was because I didn't want to fail again. I just didn't want to be called a loser again. It was just, I think sometimes that's a driving factor.
Well, those are all great teachers, and I still learn from them today, 25 years past when you were learning from them to begin with.
Yeah.
It's it's a common business saying that you have to fail to succeed,
Hmm.
but none of us actually want to fail.
Right.
And when you do fail, you feel farther away from succeeding than ever if you don't find a way to if you don't find a way to discover how far you've come,
Hmm.
to analyze what you did do, whether it was right or whether it was wrong, so that you can celebrate those things, celebrate the learning experience, celebrate how far you did get, and then reset.
Hmm.
What's your strategy this time? What are you going to do different this time?
Yeah.
And I tell people, sometimes you're just going to change your goal.
Hmm.
People look at me and like, well, you can't just quit. Quitting your goals, that's a failure. No, it's not.
Right.
Sometimes you need to let go of a goal.
Hmm.
Sometimes you need to let go of something you think is important in favor of something better,
Right.
maybe even in favor of something more achievable. That if you got that first, you could go back to the previous goal and you'd find yourself closer to it.
Hmm.
And that I found out through a major medical situation.
Yeah. It's when I first wrote my uh, my first book in 2013, I thought, this is going to be a one-off. I'm just going to do one book. But it was well received. And then I partnered with somebody else. We wrote another book, and that went bestseller in like 4 countries. And it was like, okay, I'm on to something. And I just published my 50th book in 11 years.
Nice.
And now I out of those books, some of them are client books, some of them I've helped other people with their books. But it was something that I did that I really just wanted to do. It was not something that I was looking to do, create a sideline business or go somewhere, outside of my marketing. But it's become something that people are now coming to me and say, Rob, help me with my book. Help me do this. Help me do that. And so I'm starting to pivot. And I'm like, okay, maybe I don't need to do all this other extra marketing. Maybe I just focus on the one thing that I'm really passionate about. And people look at me like, "Well, Rob, that's crazy. You should have a load of constant clients that are giving you money." And I'm like, "Yeah, but it doesn't interest me anymore."
There's that old poster from the 80s where if you love something, let it go. And if it was meant to be, it'll come back to you. But I'm more a believer in sometimes you let it go just to let it go.
Hmm.
And you may not even want it back because it's better that you let it go.
Right.
I grew up with a birth defect in my left leg that they never figured out. They never were able to diagnose me. They did a bunch of surgeries on me when I was 10 and under just to enable me to be able to walk. Some of those surgeries had never been done before. But they always told me I was going to end up in a wheelchair. And I fought against it and fought against it for years. I did things I shouldn't do. I was playing basketball. I was an outside salesperson, up on my foot a lot, and I was determined that I was going to always have my left leg. And then I came to a point where I could not walk, could not put any weight on that ankle, and had to come to terms with the fact that I could keep it, but then I would be in that wheelchair, or I could let it go and I could upgrade, which I did. And in many of my keynotes, I talk about the fact that I should have done it several years earlier because it had been hurting me and causing me to not be able to be as active as I wanted to be with six kids for some time.
Hmm.
But I kept hanging on to it. I wouldn't let go of it. And letting go of it let me win anyway. You lose a leg, but you win anyway. And then I tell my audiences there's nothing like that new foot smell.
I think there's probably a lot of people who would fight that constantly. They would look for cures. They would look and you know, I think we do that in our own business. And we spend we spend all of our time looking at what our competitors are doing till it drives us mad. And I just got tired of dealing with that. I don't even care about my competitors. I don't look at what they're doing. I don't want to see their numbers. I gave in. I don't want to do it. And I think sometimes we have to get rid of the things that are really holding us back in order for us to win. And it's I think losing a leg is that probably takes a lot of time to come to that decision.
Well, it's certainly been an adjustment, but since it was an adjustment to a better life and a better future, it was a lot easier to take. And it's a philosophy that businesses can use in terms of, we really like this product. We have a lot of our ego wrapped up into it, but it's not selling. We're losing money on it. Do you keep it or do you let it go? What about that employee you hired that just really needs to be let go, but you don't want to let
Yeah.
them go? You feel bad about it. You feel bad about yourself for hiring them. There are a lot of things in business that get held on to the detriment of the company. And if you don't let pieces go, you can end up losing the entire business.
Hmm. Yeah.
Same thing with relationships, staying in that relationship, not being willing to lose that relationship and move on, hopefully to a better one, or at
Hmm.
least a different one, based on the fact that you're the one you have now, you'd rather keep it and live with the misery than the potential misery of not having one for however long.
Hmm.
So, and that's an aspect of winning anyway that people really need to understand. But it goes beyond that.
Hmm. My latest book is called Legacy, and as I got older, I'm 55 now, and I have six kids. I have six grandkids, and when I actually, my wife and I took my mother-in-law to France for 2 weeks. And we were in southern France, and while we were vacationing, I came up with this idea because I was working with another client on their book. And I thought, I've written all these books. Why not write a book on legacy? I think most people think legacy is leaving behind money. But for me, it's always been leaving behind knowledge. What's the next generation going to learn from me? And when you talked about employees, I think a lot of times we hire people to fill that transactional need, but we don't teach the employees what our legacy is, what it means to work for this company, the mission, the goals. And so they don't understand. And so they just work how they want to work. And we've never really got into that. Hey, this is what it means to work here. This is what it's going to mean in 10 years. And employees, they don't care. And so we have to let them go and go through that process over and over again. I think it just dry. I just saw somebody hiring for like the umpteenth time, and I'm like, God, their churn rate must be horrible because they're always running ads. And my son said, "Yeah, Dad, I just got a job at UPS." And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I know so many people over the Christmas season they quit because it's just, they just drive them hard. And I look at businesses today a little differently now. Like, what is their legacy? What are they going to be known for? In 50 years, will anybody remember this business? And I look at Disney World, Walt Disney as a perfect example is that everybody knows them now, but it was really hard for him to get started. And you talk about ego, he had to drop his ego many times in order to get stuff done, to take, to accept money from businesses for them to sponsor certain things. And but now they're in a position where it's better. They can command, their, but it takes time.
When you talk about employee churn and how that it's tough to keep good employees, it's tough to find good employees these days. Corporations are always complaining. What I wish corporations would learn to do is to teach particularly their sales staff, because sales is a huge part of any organization,
Hmm.
but also their customer service staff, the concept of winning anyway on their level.
Hmm.
Because when you're in sales, you're going to have failure all the time.
Right.
You're always going to be rejected. You're always going to, make 10 calls and maybe talk to two or three people, maybe get one sale. And that's a best case scenario. But if you're able to turn it around and realize that you're winning even though you're losing, and not worry so much about how other people are viewing your performance, as long as you are performing up to the standard you feel is good enough,
Right.
then you can kind of decide for yourself if the job is right for you. You don't have to get fired. You can leave if you want, or you can suddenly decide, wow, what I'm doing is good enough, and make yourself feel better. It's when you constantly feel like a loser, when people are mad at you for selling to them, people are mad at you because you're in customer service and you seem to not be able to do anything for them. When the world tells you you're losing and that you're a loser, you lose your self motivation, your self esteem, and you lose any momentum towards continuing to do that job or
Hmm.
have success in your life at all.
Right.
And that's why teaching companies, staffs, how to win anyway on a personal level, really even just a microcosmic level, from call to call, hour to hour, day to day, can totally change their attitude, which is going to change their results, which is going to change the company's results.
Hmm. Yeah, when my first job back in, I don't know, I think I was 16. I worked for a grocery store. I was a bagger. My boss was probably the best boss I've ever had. I mean, he would lead the right way. He would speak to us the right way. He wouldn't demean us in front of people. Granted, we had to wear ties and slacks. And nowadays, you go to a grocery store and all the kids are on their cell phones and you can't get anybody to help you. And, they'll say, "Oh, it's not my job." And I'm like, why don't you make it your job? Why don't you help the customer? Put your phone away. I just, we had put all of our groceries on this cart, my wife and I, and we're waiting for this guy to get off his phone to help us. I think we waited 5 minutes before he finally put the phone down to scan her. And I'm like, I would have fired his ass. But that's the world.
Well, absolutely. I mean, the work world has changed a lot in terms of how people approach their jobs, how they feel about themselves, and that's an entirely different conversation in terms of how each generation starts to look at their work.
Hmm.
But once they're in a job, you have the ability to train them and not just train them on how to do what they're doing, but how to manage their emotions with their results. A bagger today, I mean, not that we even are allowed to have bags anymore, but the scorn that they would face is something that they would have to be taught how to deal with
Hmm.
because it's just not, people aren't as able to take criticism today and they let it stop them. And that's why it's important to build up a system in their head for them to address it and build up some of that toughness again based on their view of themselves, not necessarily at all based on how the world views them.
Right. And I know that you talk about judgment a lot, in your talks and criticism. And, one of the things that I had to really overcome as an entrepreneur is getting negative feedback, and it wasn't always from my customers. Now that Google is, allowing reviews from anybody, you get these people that pop in and give their 2 cents, pop back out, and it comes up as anonymous post, and you're like, why am I even thinking about that? Why is that one anonymous post, that criticism really bothering me when I have 100 other positive ones that I could be focusing on? But entrepreneurs do it all the time.
Yeah,
And
it's human nature. And I mean, think about it. You have people like Caitlin Clark, who just was named the Athlete of the Year by Time Magazine. And there's tons of criticism about how she should not have been named that. Here in Colorado, Travis Hunter won the Heisman Trophy on Saturday. And tons of people are saying, oh, he didn't deserve that. He's not elite. He's not this. He's not that. Typically, if you're going to get criticism, at the very least, it means you're important enough to be noticed.
yeah, although sometimes maybe you're not and you want to be. Um, I helped a lot of lawyers go through their testimonials. And they're like, well, Rob, we have a 2.3 rating out of 5. And I'm looking through. I said, yeah, but they're all anonymous. They don't mean anything. Yeah, but
That's
can you
right.
clean them up? I'm like, I can flag them, but Google is Google. Stop telling people to go to Google and leave reviews. I think sometimes people invite that. They they want criticism, but they only want the good stuff. They don't really want the bad stuff.
Right. Well, they don't know how to take criticism either. I mean, that's a whole different art in terms of having discernment.
Hmm.
In going for the world championship, those couple of years and a lot of the in-between years where I've gotten close but not quite that far, I would go to a lot of different clubs and rehearse for regional levels and the world championship levels and get a ton of feedback. And I would get a ton of really bad feedback. Not necessarily critical feedback, but feedback that just wasn't pertinent to
Hmm.
what I was doing because they had no idea what I was going through and what I was going to be up against at a higher level than a club level, at their four walls at the Y.
Hmm.
It's just a very different situation. And so when you get criticism in any situation, you have to consider the source. You have to consider whether or not it's something you should at least try, or dismiss it out of hand. And then ultimately, you have to take responsibility for the fact that you did dismiss it or you did try it, because as a speaker, at least, you're the only one up there on stage. And ultimately, you can't blame it on anybody else.
Well, let's talk about the speaking world because there's so many different techniques. There's so many different speakers, different personalities, and different stories and backgrounds. And yet you go up there and you compete against these people. So, I mean, what's the assessment on who wins and who doesn't?
Well, in the Toastmasters world, it's unique because it's in some part a beauty pageant in terms of, how pretty is your speech? How well do you connect? How funny is it? How memorable is it? You're not really competing against other people because you can't control their performance.
Hmm.
And it's just like if you're a downhill skier, you aren't really competing against everybody else. You're just trying to have the best run you can have.
Hmm.
And that's what you do with a speech is create the best speech you can create in that moment and hope for the best because then you're being judged. At least with downhill skiing, there's a time that
Hmm.
judges you very objectively. In speech contests, I compare it quite often to ice dancing, where you're out there, you've got all the sequins on your dress, you're spinning around, you're trying to make sure you hit all the requirements that, the triple this and the jump that, but you also want to have the artistic expression, and then the judges decide.
Hmm.
And you don't know where they're coming from, what their experience is, whether they got mad on the way to the contest at another driver, whether they don't like the color of your tie. Who knows? So I've competed in over 160 contests in the international and humorous and table topics and tall tales and evaluation, and I have won a lot of them. I have lost not quite as many as I've won, fortunately. But ultimately, I always tell people I have won contests I should have lost, and I have lost contests I should have won because ultimately it's subjective.
Hmm.
And so you can only compete against yourself. And that's another great place to consider winning anyway, because just because you didn't take first place or even any place doesn't mean you didn't learn something, doesn't mean you didn't affect people in your audience, doesn't mean you're a bad speaker. I've gotten more press, more publicity out of losing in 2008, not even placing first, second, or third, than I did out of placing third in 2006.
Yeah, I learn a lot every time I give a speech, but like I told you off air, and I've told my audience before, is that when I got to Vegas and I had to speak in front of this group, I froze, and that was 10 years ago, and and it was because, and I'm not blaming things, but I think going through high school, going through college, I always had to stand in front of a podium, and it scared the death out of me. And so I had to stand in front of this podium and give this. I'm like, I just froze, you know. But yet, if I walk around the stage, if I allow my hands to gesture, and I can give beautiful speeches and I can entertain people for hours, but I don't want to see a podium ever again.
Well, I'm sorry, probably for you, the idea of a podium was connected to formality
Hmm.
and perfection.
Yeah,
And so letting that go by getting out from behind it freed you up. For other people, they might have completely the opposite situation where if they're not behind a podium, they feel completely vulnerable.
yeah.
I mean, the common psychology is that we are behind a podium in case people start throwing fruit or spears or whatever in whatever culture and time you might be in giving speeches. But I do prefer speaking just out in the open,
Hmm.
and I think it's definitely moved towards that over the last, well, I mean, 30 years. Zig Ziglar very rarely spoke behind a podium. And now
You know,
you can even sit
I
down.
mean, Dan Kennedy still uses an overhead projector, and I'm thinking, I don't even know how you get those things anymore because they're like 100 years old.
That's right. He's no doubt on eBay
But
looking
that's
them
his
up.
style. That's what makes him different. And people remember that because they're like, well, he's using this ancient device to put his stuff. But then there are people that have slides and they just read their slides. I'm like, you could have just emailed me and I could have just saved my time and not gone just hear your speech. Um, and they do the same thing over and over and over. Like, tell a different story, stop reading or do something.
Those are the types of speakers I'd love to get a hold of as a coach. I always tell people when I go network, it's like, if you ever heard a speaker you wish you hadn't, they're the perfect speaker to send to me. Oh, and by the way, that speaker might have been you. Not you, Rob, not you personally.
Could have been me. But no, I tried to do a slide presentation back in 2012 at a local entrepreneurs network, and I sent in my slides. They said email them to us a day before. So I said, okay. Emailed the slides. They never got there. And I'm at this thing going, hey Rob, where's your slides? I'm like, don't you have them? And so I had to wing it. And luckily, I remembered some of the things that I wrote down in that slide to make it more memorable. But I actually won an award called That One Thing Award because of that speech. And I thought, wow, I'm never doing a slide presentation again. So,
Nice.
I think we have to learn from opportunities that come about. And although there's a lot of people who never learn from their opportunities, um, but I always tell people with great power comes great opportunities. Just grab that opportunity, run with it. Um,
Well, learning is an active situation. You can lose and learn absolutely nothing if you choose to focus on the fact that you lost and just stay there.
yeah, yeah. I turned that one award into a series of books. And it wasn't because that award prompted me to write books. No, it's just there was a prize that came with that award, and it was going to this event in Scottsdale, Arizona. On the way back from Scottsdale, on the plane, I came up with an idea to write this book about social media, and that's what launched my publishing career. So everything came back to that one event that hadn't I won, I probably wouldn't have written all these books. So sometimes there's a spark that you gotta make sure it stays alive.
That's right. No, absolutely. And it's good that you got recognized for that. And learning how to win anyway might have meant that if you hadn't won that award, you might still have found a way to turn it into all the things you've turned it into.
Hmm. It just would have taken a little longer.
Right.
Yeah. But it just I like your whole philosophy of win anyway, because there are times where I've come across old partners. I used to have a flooring business when I had my cleaning business, and I got rid of that business back in 1999. And occasionally I come across my old partner in that venture. And he is mean, he is nasty. He remembers the fact that, I closed the business and that was going to be his, money maker, which never made any money anyway. And but I'm thinking, dude, that's 20 plus years ago. Why are you still bitter? But people will be that way, and they'll focus on all the negative. Just focus on the positive, and to me, that's what keeps me going. So, how do people find you? Where do they go?
Well, they could find me as a speaker at richhopkins.com. They can find me pretty much on social media anywhere under the name Rich Hopkins, whether it be LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook, Blue Sky. I'm everywhere as Rich Hopkins. And not only do I speak on Winning Anyway, but I help people with their presentation skills, help them
Nice.
write their keynotes, especially emerging keynoters. And so, hopefully there's a an opportunity for you to connect with me after you listen to this segment.
Yeah, because I never went to Toastmasters, although I had the opportunity to speak via Zoom to a Toastmasters class on writing books, and they all seemed interested. They all gave me great reviews. Um, but I think the ones that were on the program that I taught to were beginner Toastmasters because it just seemed like they weren't so polished, or maybe they're great actors. I don't know, but they were very receptive. And I think if you join Toastmasters, you do it because you want to enhance your speaking abilities. You want to go out there and get paid to speak. I think a lot of people just are afraid.
Right. Well, Toastmasters has a really diverse membership, and kind of the point is it's always full of beginning Toastmasters because a lot of times after 6 months to a year, they've overcome their fear of public speaking and they're able to go back to their life and speak in a meeting, speak
Hmm.
up for themselves, become a better salesman. Very few people are like me who've stayed in for 25 years because I like the social aspect of it. I like to compete and I like to help people.
Hmm.
Believe it or not, most people don't join Toastmasters to ever do anything in terms of professional speaking. They just want to be able to speak up the next time their boss says, "Does anybody have an idea?" And they don't have to sit in the corner of the room afraid because they don't think they can put their idea together in a coherent way.
Hmm.
So a lot of different people join Toastmasters for different reasons, and the average member is gone after a year to a year and a half. So there's a ton of turnover, and that means there's always people learning,
Right.
always people getting
Well,
better.
and you're learning from them. You're getting to
Absolutely.
learn the new thing. I'm not saying the new things, but maybe Mary has a personality that's a little aggressive, whereas George doesn't. You can help them interact a little bit better.
No, absolutely. That's being able to mentor is valuable to me because it doesn't just give me an opportunity to teach people, but to learn how to teach people better.
Hmm.
I mean, I've been coaching people for 20 years, and the rainbow of personalities that I have coached, the differences in careers that people have had that I've worked with, whether they've been in pharmaceuticals or robotics or nutrition supplements or stay-at-home moms.
Hmm.
They all need to be communicated with differently, and they all need to learn to communicate in a different way because you can't just create a bunch of clones.
Hmm.
It doesn't work.
Right. Yeah. And I've always been a big believer that my personality is my brand. So I'm a little sarcastic. Okay, a lot sarcastic. And for many, many years, I didn't let that sarcasm come out. So I'd post stuff on social and then after a while I'm like, that's it. I'm just gonna go full on sarcasm and the thing is that the people that were rejected from, they don't like sarcasm, they would go away. They would become horrible clients anyway.
Right.
People that embraced that sarcasm, they became the best clients. And I mean, I even wrote a whole series of books called Rob Versus, which is my sarcastic take on scammers and morons and lousy customer service. And people just love those books. And I just call it rejection marketing because, yeah, my personality is not going to, you know, uh, attract everybody, but it's going to reject the people that I don't really want to work with anyway. So,
And I remember in my early advertising days, I was copywriting for help wanted ads. And one of the biggest reasons you write a help wanted ad is to discourage people from applying.
yeah, I never went to college. And well, I can't say I never went. I never finished college. I went 1 year at Penn State, 1 year at a community college. And, I did take writing at one college and I took electrical engineering at another. And I never thought I'd be a writer until I just said, that's it. I'm gonna write a book, see what happens. And I still, people will email me. They'll send me texts. Do you know there's a grammar error on this page? Do you know that there's this? I'm like, did you read the book? Well, yeah. Did you like the book? Yeah. I don't care about the error then. So, I just, I do things the way I want to do them. And I
Well,
stopped.
if somebody emails you and says, I found 7 errors, you just email them back and say, really? There were 12.
But I started using that to my advantage. And so when I bring out a new book, I'll say, anybody want to give me a critique, review the book? And people will comment. And I'll send the book to them and they'll go through. I get all my editing done for free now.
There you go.
So it's not going to be perfect. I think people are going to find errors in everything. But I was helping a client with a book and he loved the layout. He loved everything about it. And then he sent it out. And the first two people said, well, you ought to change this and this and this. I said, send it out to more people. And the rest of the people loved it. I said, if you could send the book out to 100 people, you're going to get 100 different responses. As long as you like the way it looks, keep it. Otherwise, all you're going to do is keep changing it and changing it and changing it. And you're going to try to make it perfect. And that's going to take too long.
Well, that goes back to what I said about discernment,
Hmm.
being able to, what's the source of the criticism and what do you want your speech or your writing to be? How do you want it to represent you? Because you're the one who's going to have to live with it,
Hmm.
not them.
Yeah. But, I think sometimes though, and maybe I'm off base, but sometimes we allow our political or religious or our thoughts on certain subjects come out in the wrong way when we speak and we upset people. And I'm not sure if that is what we need to do. I just think we should be ourselves, but try to stay away from some of the sore subjects. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we need to bring in the light. What do you think?
Wow, that's kind of an out of left field turn for you. Appreciate that. Yeah, well, that's the point of learning to become a better communicator.
Hmm.
You're always going to have a slip up, an emotional situation. Happens on social media all the time.
Oh, yeah.
You post something and you shouldn't. You want to get in the habit of writing a post and then deleting it and not ever actually posting it and then considering whether you actually want to post it again. But I think we do need to communicate ideas that we think are important.
Hmm.
Question is how is it going to serve you?
Right.
Is it going to cost you business? Do you care if it costs you business? Is it going to cost you friends? Do you care if it's going to cost you friends? what is the cost? And that's always
Yeah.
the consequence of free speech.
You know,
We have free speech, but it's not free.
right.
It comes with a cost.
Well, yeah, and that was a valuable lesson for me because back in the Obama era, I posted something that was critical about Obama, and I lost a $70,000 a year client. And it was like, all right, lesson learned. But the thing is that, you know, eh, social has become rift with political this and that, and it gets to the point where are you adding to the noise, or are you actually, helping someone understand the subject a little bit better? And so there's, like you said, discernment.
Well, that depends also on your audience.
Right.
If you're on Twitter or X, you can have an audience like I do of 54,000 people, and you're practically just shouting into the wind. But if you have an audience of 150 carefully curated people, you can say something and actually make a difference.
Hmm. Yeah. So this was great. We could probably talk all day long, but I have only so many minutes I can put on a podcast. But everybody, I want you to go over to richhopkins.com. Learn about Rich. Learn about how you can improve your speaking, your leadership abilities, even, and let Rich critique your speaking, help you improve it. Because if you want to get out there and maybe make money as a speaker, just build your confidence. Rich is the guy. So with that, I want to say thanks, Rich, and we'll see everyone on the next episode. Adios.